January 28, 25, Town Council Quarterly CIP Workshop. We'll call this meeting to order and start off with public comments pertaining to only two agenda items. Did anyone sign up for public comment?
No.
You did not sign up? I'm sorry. Did you sign up?
Come on up. Come on up. You didn't know you need to sign up?
No, sir.
It's a workshop, so it's
Mr.
fine.
Mayor, member of council, thank you so much for, I'm here to speak on the topic.
Speak your name and address
Oh, I'm
first,
sorry.
please.
David Thurlow, THURLOW, 131 Bridge Street. I'm here to speak to sound ordinance. First of all, I'd like to thank council for giving this matter consideration. I know it's been a matter of great conversation on the bluff. And so we're very grateful for the favorable response and the attention that's been given. One of the issues that I've just raised, and I know many people have sent messages in by email, is in terms of enforceability, because currently I understand there are ordinances in place that can be violated, and you call to report it, and then 10 minutes later you call and report it again, and then nothing changes. And so enforceability would be a question that I would raise up. What do we do if there is sound violations? And then also just to say it's great that the properties are being used, and I think everyone that I know who's speaking to that is very favorable about Bluffton being a welcoming community and having those parks available for such activities. And a lot of times the noise goes unnoticed. From our perspective, we're 6 blocks up from the oyster factory, and there are times when we're watching TV in the home and we can hear the boom, boom, boom from the oyster factory over the noise on the television. So it's those kinds. And I liken it to sometimes you're in traffic and a car goes by and it's got those subwoofers and it's just pounding out the side. It's the bass that seems to be the most annoying, and it actually you can feel it in your chest, even down 5 houses down from the oyster factory. So we all want to see Bluffton enjoyed by every resident and visitors alike. Glad there's some sort of restriction on the sound, but just enforceability, what do we do if things are violated? And then also from a person, it's just, if they can only turn the bass down sometimes, that makes all the difference. So thank you for your attention. We just hope and pray that good things come of this, and thank you all for your service. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so no other public comment that I see. We'll start off with the discussion of proposed amendments to the Southern Low Country Stormwater Design Manual's Fee and Leave program. Andrea?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So we are here to discuss the proposed amendments to the Southern Low Country Stormwater Design Manual Fee and Leave program. Now, firstly, I want to say that you've seen a lot of watershed staff recently, and so I want to just clarify that what we're discussing tonight is totally separate from the wetland and resiliency ordinances and also the ongoing comprehensive drainage studies. I just want to make that distinction. So we are requesting that y'all provide counsel on these proposed amendments as it pertains to fee in lieu and an MEP process. So kind of flip things around for you, but just as we go through this presentation, I want you guys to just consider these questions. We'll circle back to it obviously at the end, but I just want to put this in front of you so you have a chance to kind of get a feel for what I'm going to be looking for. Okay, so maximum extent practicable. Under the Clean Water Act, the town as an MS4, good. The town as an MS4 must require that pollutants be minimized to the MEP, or maximum extent practicable. For development and redevelopment, this is accomplished via adherence to the UDO and our Stormwater Design Manual. Through the Stormwater Design Manual, developers may submit for MEP when the proposed development has site constraints. Typically, it's poor soils or a high seasonal water table, which prevent full conformance with our stormwater design requirements, specifically stormwater retention volume, which is water quality requirement. Think of that way. For example, our stormwater standards are here, and a site may only be able to achieve here. They would then be required to submit an MEP submittal to us, which then staff would review and either approve or deny, right, for that difference. So fee in lieu, the current fee in lieu language in the UDO and Stormwater Design Manual gives the town authority to establish a fee in lieu program. And these proposed edits just give us that mechanism to do so. Specifically, like I said, when a development can't accommodate on their site the stormwater requirements, those water quality requirements, they submit for their MEP analysis, and part of that would be a fee in lieu. So it's basically, again, we're here, they can only do here. So this is the MEP process, they pay the shortfall for what they cannot achieve on their site. And that fee itself, the unit cost, which we're gonna get into, or the basis for it, but the unit cost itself would be part of the master fee schedule. So that would be rolled out as part of FY26 master fee schedule and budget. So what would the town do with these funds? Well, they would be used to fund the construction and maintenance of impervious restoration water quality of BMPs, purchase of land for conservation areas, underserved open space, protection of wetlands, and also purchase of development rights. So the monetary basis for fee in lieu would be, like a fee in lieu payment would be based and equal to a unit of SWRV. So what that means is, again, we look at water quality volume as cubic feet. Basically, whatever they can't achieve in cubic feet is equal to a unit cost that they have to pay. So say a developer had to retain and treat 10,000 cubic feet of stormwater, but they could only do 7 on their site. Well, then they'd be paying 3,000 times this unit cost, which is the fee in lieu rate. Makes sense. If the developer and/or private property owner takes responsibility for maintaining that PMB or provide the land for it, then obviously that unit cost could be reduced accordingly. The fee in lieu rate, again, I already said this, but the fee in lieu rate would be included as part of the town's master fee schedule under stormwater. And then we would update it annually as part of the budget, as needed based on changes in cost of land or maintenance of BMPs, etc. So the compliance calculator, we would add this in. And again, I know I've said this to you before, but basically the compliance calculator is sort of a plug and chug for developers to figure out how much they're required to treat and then how they can do so through best management practices. So we were going to add a tab basically to this compliance calculator that should they opt for an MEP submittal, it basically gives them that dollar value so that they know up front what it would be, what it would cost for them should they want to proceed with the MEP. Now, again, that fee in lieu rate where the 151.92, it's providing an example right now, but that dollar amount is not something that you would see until we go through the budget cycle for fiscal year 26. Okay.
Say that again, huh?
That dollar amount is going to be in the master fee schedule for fiscal year 26. So I just want to make it clear that like that dollar amount I'm giving as an example, but it's not part of the text amendments of the design manual. So we give you like the basis and how the number is derived in the design manual and what you can do with it. And then the master fee schedule is what actually stipulates the dollar amount. Okay, so here is an example. These are actually all projects with approved MEP submittals showing the fee in lieu amount that would have been required had fee in lieu been established at the time. And you may be looking at some of these dollar amounts going, woof, that's a lot of money. But fee in lieu is not meant to give developers an out for stormwater requirements, right? The fee in lieu amount may cause them the developer to reconsider the number of buildings they're proposing or changing the paving material type in their parking lot. But the developer gets to choose whether to pay fee in lieu, to do more to achieve stormwater requirements, or to not build. That is the developer's choice. So with that, based on everything that we've kind of gone over, and I understand it was fast, but I have a couple considerations for you guys. So with that, do you all agree on the monetary basis for fee in lieu, meaning that that's the basically number cost, which don't worry about the number right now because y'all will decide on that later or agree on that later. but that it be a unit of stormwater retention volume.
Start with questions, Bridget?
Before I can say I agree, my main question would be, to understand like the rate schedule that you have here, I would want to know and understand what impact, this would be to the town in terms of if someone is unable to meet their MEP requirements, and we in turn are going to have some type of mitigation in place in terms of, whatever they're not able to do to make sure that it's still up to whatever our stormwater standard is. So in understanding like whether that impact is going to require like more maintenance on our part or us going in and adding an additional thing. Like if I know what the financial impact of us assuming that responsibility is,
Right.
then I could say like, okay, yeah, I think this would make sense. I just want to make sure that before I say yes to it, it doesn't become something that ultimately like we end up having to expend more
Right.
funds to try to address.
Right, so I can tell you that the unit cost that's put forth, which again, I don't want to get hung up on the number,
Right.
because it's not part of the text, but the number that is provided in those examples is based off of all of those factors: land, construction, maintenance, design, permitting. Am I missing anything?
That's your previous slide. There you go.
Is it there? Yes.
That one.
So it's hard to read, but in that Excel spreadsheet there, that snippet, it does break down the town program. To answer your question, yes, it includes all of that. So the intent would be that money received through these funds would be able to afford the town to purchase the land to implement a BMP, or purchase development agreements, or purchase an area for conservation. It doesn't necessarily mean that we have to do a water quality BMP somewhere. It means that we would also have the ability to protect land that would otherwise be treating that same amount for water quality.
I get your question. I just know that in some instances it's like we have to also be able to plan for the unforeseen. And I can speak from personal experience in the sense of, you know, let's say a commercial project is on site and they realize that the normal route they were going to go to for, you know, their stormwater plan, there's a drain or something that's been impeded or impaled, whether it's sediment, you know, debris, what have you, and they have to dig, you know, a trench or something to go and extend to another side. Like, do our factors, are our, what we're looking at here just covers ordinary what would happen, or does it also include an extenuating circumstance for someone unable to meet MEP?
Can I ask a question? Are we talking about maintenance of a BMP that gets put in? If that's your question, if they build a BMP, part of the fee in lieu, would it be our responsibility to come in and maintain it? The answer is no. They would still own it and maintain it. We would not take it over just because we pull in a fee in lieu MEP process. It's still their BMP. Did that answer?
Not about the BMP. I thought like this was for someone who isn't able to meet like the entire threshold of their MEP.
Yeah, so we would be, their project is still separate from ours. It wouldn't be that, you know, a commercial site can't put in X and then the town goes in and puts it on the same property. If it can't be put in, it can't be put in, period. This would be the town doing it on another property in the same watershed, right? Does that answer that? And then again, the dollar value would be adjusted annually so that we're continually keeping up with like the consumer price index, so that hopefully we're always reflective of what it would actually cost to do these projects.
Good.
So a couple of things we know is developers want to maximize the use of their property for maximum gain, personal gain. That's how it operates. The second part we know is that water has a domino effect. We've learned this a lot in the last few years, especially with the flooding situation we've had. So if a person comes in, just the developer, and they can't meet the needs of the requirement to keep the water on their property, okay? But they impact somebody else around them in a negative way, even if they do a fee in lieu. I don't like that.
So fee in lieu is not for quantity, it is for quality. So they're still required to detain the same amount of water that would be required of our manual. This fee in lieu and the MEP process itself only provides, I want to use the word variance, but it's more like a variance, for water quality treatment, okay? So it isn't going to mean that there is more water leaving the site.
So for clarity for me, what you're saying to me is that the sum of water that they would have to retain or keep it in their proximity of their own location, if it is going to impact their neighbor, they still have to deal with that issue on their site. They can't get away from it by paying a fee in lieu. That's what you're telling me?
Correct, yes.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, this would just be, again, there are some sites, you know, it's kind of all that's left in town really, that has a high water table and poor soils, and so they just aren't able to, there just isn't feasibly enough room on their site to do what we're asking them to do, and so through the MEP process, we say, okay, well, have you considered doing porous concrete or something like that instead, or, you know, pavers instead of asphalt? And we kind of have to meet them in the middle, and it's pretty subjective, which is why the fee in lieu would be so helpful to standardize that process, you know, adding in that, okay, well, you said that you can only do X, now pay, you know, this amount. That just allows the town then to go in and do that water quality treatment elsewhere in that same watershed. It has nothing to do with the quantity of the water.
Got it.
So why would we allow a developer to build on their property if they can't meet our standards?
So, well, it's a mixed bag of answers, I suppose, but it's a mixture of development rights and then also the Clean Water Act entirely. We can't just say no, but the Clean Water Act says that they have to meet them to the maximum extent practical, meaning we can't, and it's town-wide, right? Like, just in development, you know, we say you can't discharge your pollutants to the MEP, or you have to discharge your, I'm getting mixed up, doesn't matter. Basically, we can't let the town go hog wild, and we have to monitor every piece of what we do in terms of pollutants to make sure that through development, through like paint, grease, that everything is monitored and that we are reducing pollutants to the MEP. Now, just specific to development and redevelopment, which is obviously what our design manual is for, that's where we have the MEP process. So we review it, there's criterion, we review it, and either we approve or deny it. The one piece that the language is already built into the UDO, but the mechanism isn't established, which is fee in lieu, is what gives us that piece to then be able, as a town, to go in and, again, either buy the land or implement a water quality practice elsewhere in that same watershed.
What I just heard you say, in my interpretation, is that our UDO is not strong enough.
No, our UDO, so the UDO gives us the legal authority to implement a fee in lieu program. The stormwater design manual is what breaks down how it has to happen. The language just isn't there, and so that's what these text edits are for.
And if I could, just to really like, just to simplify it, is you had asked why we allow developers to do this. What we have to, per the Clean Water Act and the state, we have to allow for that maximum extent practical. So the state, federal says we have to allow that mechanism. So this is putting those, and it's subjective. It's a back and forth. Like how close can you get? How close can you get? And that's something that we're required to do as MS4. So we have to have that provision. And so here's another tool to be able to take that subjectivity out and get there. So like you asked, why do we do it? We have to. Yeah. We have to if we want to maintain our MS4 standard. So, and then all the technical stuff of how to get there. So if that just helps simplify the reasons why. And this would be one reason as a developer, you could choose, like Andrea said, okay, we're going to do a mix of impervious. Here's some other things we can do to get closer. Or we can pay this fee and we can treat the water in the same watershed, which meets the act because you want clean water. Or maybe I don't build as much. Maybe that price tag is too high and I do. So you may get less if that helps.
Okay, when you say, and I hear you, but what you just said gave me another thought. It's up to the developer whether they're gonna make that decision, or it's up to the town?
So it's up, when the MEP, if the developer chooses to go the MEP route, meaning that they know they can't meet our stormwater requirements and they want to submit to us the MEP, they then have the choice to either pay the fee in lieu for that shortfall, whatever it may be. They have the choice to reduce their amount of imperviousness so that they can meet our stormwater standards, or they don't build.
Or they don't build?
Right.
And it's ultimately our approval.
Yeah, I mean, our approval of the MEP process is, but again, they could see that dollar amount that comes, that's, put forth for fee in lieu and say,
I'm good now. As long as I know that we have the voice and a strong voice.
Yeah.
And our UDO is strong enough to support that. I'm good. Thank you.
Sorry, just
Yeah,
one
no,
minute.
you're fine.
Sorry, sometimes I hear different perspectives sitting
No,
over
thank
here,
you.
so.
Ms. Burton?
I think my concerns were some of the others that the other council members voiced. I just wanted to make sure that we weren't giving developers an easy out by just paying a fee and not having to deal with their stormwaters. But then once I got to what the fees potentially could be, it definitely helped mitigate that a little bit. I do have a couple, one thing you said, if there's not feasible enough room on their site to manage their stormwater, but if they chose to build a smaller building, then that is one, they could then manage their stormwater.
right, exactly.
Or if they chose, like you said, the different the impervious pavers versus the impervious.
Yeah, it would just kind of force them to weigh the options, if it's a $3 million price tag and they say, oof, it'd be cheaper for us to not build, one of the 3 buildings, and then they have that space now where the 3rd building was going to go to do their stormwater, requirements, then they've achieved the manual.
I think I just want to go back to what Councilman Wood was saying, though. I want to so if they cannot manage their stormwater on their property, they can choose this fee in lieu, and we will mitigate it in the same watershed, but that is somehow not going to affect the properties around it? I don't quite understand how
No,
that
so
would not.
all sites are still required to detain or attenuate, which is basically hold up to the 100-year storm and then safely convey that. The MEP process does not exempt them from any of those things.
It does not exempt them from meeting the 100-year storm standard.
Correct.
The quantity of water.
Yep.
Quantity.
Yeah, so this MEP process is just specific to water quantity.
Quality.
Sorry, quality.
So just to clear that up a little bit, we always want them to meet their requirements. To do that, they have several different options we put out. This is not for volume control, it is for water quality. So if they come in and say we have a site and they can't meet water volume control, that's a different issue. We would not let that go forward. But if they can meet their water volume quality and then come in and say, but we can't meet our water quality requirements, they can come in and say, nope, we still want to build everything, then they pay up a lot of money. Or they can reevaluate that and come back and say less building, less pavers, whatever they want to do. But this really helps staff understand what they want to do and help us standardize how we do a review. Right now, when they come in and they try to meet MEP, it is very subjective. They come in and say, we're going to build anyway. We really don't have any mechanism to stop that. This helps us with the water quality, puts in place the process, and it's pretty straightforward. You come in and you meet your volume control, you're good to go. You don't meet it, you have several different options of building less or paying the fee. So we can take that money and move it somewhere else in the watershed to meet that water quality goal. And that's what this really is all about.
Bill, I was listening to you, and that's probably for you, because I'm trying to, if they're still required to retain the water for a 100-year storm on their property.
That's volume control.
Volume. So if they're retaining it, how do we measure the quality of that water? Well, I mean, you know what I'm saying? If it's not leaving there,
So Yes, and it's detention, not retention. Retention, it would be like think of it as retention as your water quality and detention as your water quantity. So that's the volume of water. So every stormwater practice has different water quality treatment amounts, percentages that they treat for nutrients and sediment, right? So usually ponds are used for your 100-year storm attenuation, your detention. They don't have the same water quality treatment as a bioretention area. So it's not like it works like if you detain all of your water, you're automatically treating it all.
That's kind of what made sense to me. I had to get.
So yeah, different practices have different water quality parts to it and different retention volumes. So we take both of those into consideration when we do a review. But just because you have a big pond doesn't mean you'll be able to treat as much. Oh, team
Skip
effort.
all
I
of
love
water,
a
shut
team
up.
effort.
Hey, I'm.
Something that can help dam buyback project. So the water quality volume that we're targeting for all development sites is 1.95 inches of rainfall for the impervious area or the drainage area that's being developed, okay? So 1.95 inches of rain that falls on that development site goes into the storm drain. That's what we're trying to capture and treat in terms of water quality volume, okay? So 2 inches of rain is not what's causing the flooding issues. Okay, so this is all about a fee in lieu for the water quality volume. It's all about water quality, the post-construction discharge amount, that's quantity control. They're still required to do this, to do that. That's not about this. This is only about that 1.95 inches of rain. Can they capture that? Can they treat that based on the conditions on their site? And so that's what we're evaluating when we get an MEP. That, yeah, we agree, you got bad soils, you got a high groundwater table, you got limited options, we'll look at that. Well, hey, why, instead of building 3 buildings, why don't you, just do 2 and create more open space? The development agreement may have something to say about that in terms of what they want to do. They also then look at the fee in lieu that they would be subject to and make a decision to go from there.
Okay, that 1.59 you said, or
1.95 inches of rainfall.
is that in a 24-hour period, or what?
24 hours.
24 hours.
Which in a 100-year storm is 11 inches in 24 hours, just to give you some difference.
Yeah, I'm used to it in my business, if we get over 4 inches in 24 hours, it automatically closes the oyster harvesting in the river for a few days until they can test and make sure that there was no bad runoff. So I get part of this. Just I don't want the message to, and I don't think it does. I've read all this stuff before I got here. Still didn't understand all of it. Do we have a recommendation from the Watershed Advisory Committee?
Yeah, and I can skip ahead, but yeah, so this was taken to Planning Commission in November and then WAPAC in December. The fee in lieu amendment's basically a simplified version of what you've seen today. And yes, there was a recommendation from them. Planning Commission was just discussion. Because this is part of the overall amendments to design manual, it's going to be passed or adopted via resolution. It's not, a formal item, so it didn't technically need it. But yes, I did.
Before we move forward, can I ask one more question?
Certainly.
Mayor?
Certainly.
So, first of all, and I wish that it had been in this write-up on the report here. I like what you were saying about, we talked about maximization of the property, and then you were saying, well, they don't have to maximize it to maybe meet their goals. You gave some examples. Instead of building 3 buildings, you may build 2. And I understand beyond the scale of my knowledge or the scope of my knowledge, I understand there may be sites, as you just indicated, where the water table's high and some soil issues and stuff like that. But I don't know. Being a layman, it just seems, trying to get my head wrapped around the fact. So we are going to allow them to go ahead and maybe maximize to some degree, pay the money, take the problem off their property away, so they can achieve what they want to achieve by doing the fee in lieu. and we're gonna go find someplace else to try to, in the watershed, to try to mitigate this thing, instead of just saying, you figure out the problem. Here's what the parameters you have to work with. I'm a little bit baffled by
So
that.
I will say that the MEP review process is pretty critical, even though it feels pretty subjective as it is without this fee in lieu dollar amount associated with it. But there is that back and forth constantly of, okay, well, even if you're not able to do something on your little piece of the phase, is there an opportunity in another phase of the same development to meet the water quality requirements? And there's that back and forth, so that it isn't just we can't do it, so we can't build our 3 buildings and meet stormwater requirements, so we're gonna pay the fee. It's not that simplistic. It's still a very critical process that we go through and have to analyze and determine if it even is necessary, if they even meet the MEP to begin with. That's part of
But
that.
in theory, it's a question, maybe they should have only asked for 2 buildings to begin with, but they see financially that it's in their best interest to build the 3rd one and pay the fee.
That may be the case.
Right.
And that's why that dollar amount would just be enough to then cover if the town were to, to be able to go in and do the same thing in the same watershed.
I want to add one thing in there. Thank you all for the clarification on that. I just wanted to add that, and commend the department on this, because I think these are the type of things we do want to get ahead of, in the sense of not knowing where issues were before. And it's not like this is a self-imposed problem that we're making or allowing people to be scapegoated from. It's kind of like our hands were tied prior to this anyways, and nothing was going on. Because we certainly don't want people to develop within our jurisdiction and create stormwater, whether it's quantity or quality issues that we in turn can mitigate and then are stuck dealing with anyways. So the fact that you all have taken that initiative to look at this particular problem and come up with a way to address it, instead of just kicking the can down the road, saying like it's gonna be whatever, we can't do anything. I think this is the type of stuff definitely that we wanna see, because it is an issue that cannot go unaddressed in terms of protecting our water and making sure that we show our respect and support of the Clean Water Act and the value it provides to all of us. So thank you guys for that.
Questions from? So I heard you say that technically, legally, we have to come up with something because we don't have the authorization to say, no, you can't build 3 buildings, you can only build 2 buildings on this property. Is that what I heard?
Yes.
So this would just give us that option. We could say you're either going to pay all this money or you're not going to build it. So it's just. Okay.
The only, excuse me, just real quick, sorry not to belabor the conversation, but I think an easy way to compare this to is, if you recall a while back, we approved a tree mitigation fee in lieu program. And we had one instance, and that was fairly recent, we had one instance where a developer went back and forth, similar, different subject matter, but went back and forth and was like, I have to remove all these trees. And so we said, okay, if you do that, here's what the fee is. And it quite honestly was a very high number. So what did we do? We went back and forth and we said, hey, can you shift this? Can you do that? Can you plant bigger here? And guess what? They met the rules and regulations and they did not pay that fee, because once you, quite frankly, put that dollar amount to it, it makes you adjust and rethink. So you could get to maybe less buildings, but it is an option that is. And then what we would do, similar to the stormwater, is, or storm, the water quality part of it, is then go in and use that money to plant trees in that same vicinity or to offset it. So it's very similar to that tree mitigation fee. Like I said, we went through it once and they decided, you know what, I don't want to write that big of a check, so I'm going to keep those trees. So just to kind of give you that comparison.
Certainly. So, and you touched on something that was in my mind a second ago, and for clarity from my education. So on the trees, and trees are one of the best methods to absorb water, when it comes to stormwater runoff. But, and it's a question really, I'm assuming they don't really mitigate the negative aspects of the water quality. It's just the quantity, not the quality. Is that a true statement?
So they can be used for water quality treatment, but it's a very small amount in comparison to other practices. So we also.
They don't impact, did you say quality or quantity?
Quality.
Quality, okay.
Okay. So,
I have one more question as well.
okay. So Loco Stormwater Design Manual does not include anything like this?
So all it does is include in our MEP process, there are currently, well, it's being revised, but there's currently 11 steps. This is the 11th step. Pay fee and lieu, it's basically what it says, but we just don't have, that's what this is for, so that we can get that fee and lieu program established.
So when we do this, is everyone else going to be on board with the same thing, the county and Hardeeville and Jasper?
So Beaufort County, because again, this is all part of those other amendments to the SLOCO manual that were brought in front of you guys in October. They are looking to adopt some of the same changes due to reasons of their own. Cannot speak for other SLOCO members, of course, but I do not know if they're proceeding with this particular revision. They do have it in their manual, like I said, as that 11th step, but I do not know if they plan to establish the actual fee and lieu program.
Okay, Ms. Burton.
I just want to confirm, first of all, we'll pick the exact fee later, is that correct? So the numbers you put in here are not,
Yeah,
but
so,
they are about, because
yeah, so this is,
they are large numbers, and so it will remain something similar.
it will be very similar,
Okay.
yes, if not that dollar amount.
And I just want to confirm that if they choose to pay this very, very large sum as a fee in lieu, it is possible for us, through some of the examples you gave, I just want to make sure that pollution is not going to end up in our ecosystems and rivers. So it's possible through some of the examples you gave to mitigate that so it does not get to the rivers.
Correct.
Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
So that kind of got us through the monetary basis for it. But in terms of the qualified uses, again, we discussed that was the, purchasing of land for a conservation area or a protection of a wetland area. It was implementation of, like the town implementing its own BMP, constructing it, maintaining it, all that. And then it was also purchase of development rights. Do you guys have any issue with that or anything else that we as staff need to consider for inclusion? I'll go back to that slide.
So the decision, once that money is collected, it would still come to council for our decision as to whether we want to purchase property or whether we want to build a system, a man-made system?
Yeah, so.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So I guess you need answers to all these little questions.
I mean, it was just,
There's a lot of them on here.
sorry.
I don't know that y'all need to go through each of the questions. We addressed most of them in the discussions that you had, and I think with what y'all have kind of given, I think we have guidance on the vast majority of these to be able to bring anything back. The only one that I think would be something for you to consider would be the last one. And that's really more of just as we're putting things into place, if you wanted to exempt public projects from the fee in lieu, this may be town projects, it could be school projects, it could be something like that. Or if you would want them to have to comply with the fee in lieu as well. That would be kind of the last lingering question. I think they need to be able to put everything together.
Comments from council on that?
Yeah, I think for that one, it should be as looked on as an individual basis for council to be able to weigh in on, like on a case-by-case nature, because all won't be the same in terms of what's the scale of the project that we're looking at, in terms of is it even necessary to make an exemption or easier to just put in an instance of some type of paver, pervious surface, whatever it is. So I think that one's a little too broad, I think, to speak on without knowing exactly what kind of projects that would include, or seeing some examples of that.
So I can give you one actually in this example. The academic institution here is a turf field replacement. So think about their limits of disturbance, right, which is just the football field. Well, but they can't put a bioretention in a football field. It doesn't really make for a good game of football, or a fun one, I guess. But anyway, it's a $3 million tag. So that was, I just want to know, are we prepared to have the school district pay that, or would they be exempt? That's just.
May I jump in there? So following Councilwoman Frazier's comment, we all want to help public projects and public institutions, including our own selves. But the problem is, like even the example you're providing, while my heart says we want to help, we've identified a problem. We know we have a problem. So now we're not going to do anything about it at this particular location, which increases our problem somewhere else. I mean, I don't get that. It's a conundrum. It's like, that does not make sense to me.
And I agree. I don't think that the rules should be different for the town of Bluffton or school than it is to our general public and our property owners who want to build whatever. Sure, we could probably say that, but I like to lead by example, and if we're going to make them do it, then we need to do it ourselves.
I agree. I think we need to be a good example.
I think in this instance, we're asking anyone to evade our rules and saying that's on a case-by-case issue. Like, no one is going to be able to detract from providing whatever their required stormwater in terms of quantity is. But let's say we have, a school or a smaller school or a smaller daycare thing. I think that is a part of community in terms of like, it should be on a case-by-case, because to compare a school district with a multi-million-dollar budget to, let's say we have one of our local child care things or something here who would want to come in front of us for no different than the variances that we have in every other aspect of our permitting process. Well, I'm not saying that we should greenlight everybody. We should be able to look at it, because it's not a one-size-fits-all situation.
Let me ask you, there's many other ways I would think this body, for example, can help mitigate a problem. Financial, for one. I guess we have people ask us for things constantly. I don't know, and I hear you loud and clear, and I'm not really disagreeing. I'm playing devil's advocate, trying to work through this myself, but I don't know why we can't leave the standard in place, like the mayor said. And if they have, if that's a hindrance of a magnitude that they don't feel that mountain they can scale, then they should come back to us and ask if there's other means or resources available to them to mitigate. Because, for example, in the question of the $3.3 million example that you're providing, we don't have to nullify our water quality controls. We can do it, keep it, and find other ways to try to help them if possible. I would rather take that approach.
We're saying the same things. It's just saying that, for instance, if a person right now comes even to them, a developer cannot bypass this and say, well, I don't want to keep pervious surface to be able to take care of my water quality. I'm going to build my third building. It's already been established that that's going to be a no, you cannot do that. This is what we're asking you to do. But I'm saying we as a town should not be treating an out-of-town developer the same way that we would, let's say, a residential person on one of our streets, who still owns, let's say, a property and doesn't have the means to be able to provide that. I'm thinking in my mind, mitigating is we come in and help them with whatever that solution is, not saying that we're going to pay the cost of them to do it. It might be saying, like, come in and put in gravel or pavers, and here's an option for you to be able to make that a possibility, instead of just blanketing them and saying, we'll treat you like we do a developer, because it's two different things. We don't even do that now for for commercial and residential properties.
Well, yeah, and remember the MEP would be subject to anyone who meets our stormwater requirements as of current. So it isn't always necessarily just a one single lot house to begin with. It's if they meet our stormwater applicability standards and through our compliance calculator, the plug and chug, they realize that they aren't able just on their size or on their site, regardless of the circumstance, to do it, then that's when the MEP would come into play. And then the fee and lieu.
I'm tired for you, Andre. You can sit down.
You signed up for this great.
That's it. Then, like I said, we've already gone to Planning Commission and WAPAC, and then the next step would be to compile all this stuff and get it back in front of you for the March meeting. All of the Soloco amendments. Yeah. And then rolled out for implementation April 1st. Any further questions for me?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, up next we have direction on proposed amendments to the town's municipal code of ordinance on regulations associated with special events and park rules. Ms. Heather Collins.
Okay, so I don't think I'll be as technical as the water quality discussion, but all right. So you may recall that a couple months ago, I was here before you for some proposed amendments to the municipal code as it related to park rules and our facilities and regulations associated with that. There was a component in that where I had proposed some amendments that were related to noise at certain either special events or our facilities. At that point, the town council, your discussion and direction was, let's pull that. The discussion got much bigger than the my intent was with the amendments. Go back, do some homework, do some research, and workshop that again. So that's why I'm before you. So we've done that homework, we've done that research, and I've got some proposed amendments for you to discuss and provide direction on and how you'd like us to move forward. I know you've seen this before, I won't read it, but basically we take care of our citizens. We do that in this instance, two different ways. We create great public spaces, public parks, facilities. We are always improving our parks and making adjustments. But we also need to balance that with the community and the residents who are impacted by the results of those improvements and what that means. So primarily what the discussion was centered around and some of the comments that we received and complaints were associated with Oyster Factory Park. So we've just finished a capital improvement project where we did some improvements out there, some better places, or excuse me, more improved places for people to stand and, provide performances, dance, whatever the case may be. So that work has been completed. So with that, we are anticipating that it will be used more. It's a different kind of space, so that will change how often it's used, the intensity of its use, the noise, and things of that nature. Lindy Simino is here, who manages special events, so as you can see, it's a group effort, so if you have any questions specific about that, she's here as well. With that, though, some of our other smaller parks within the historic district, this one in particular is immediately adjacent to single-family residential uses. So you'll see, in that green shaded area, that's where Oyster Factory Park is. You've got the Garvin Garvey side, you have the boat ramp, and then you have the other side where we've just completed the improvements. And then you can see the footprints on those maps of where the homes are. So they are adjacent to that property. So while it's not a primarily single-family residential district, it's a mixed-use district, it is bookend by single-family residences. So that's where I said we're trying to balance out how to take care of our community with great parks and special events and places, and then also take care of the community who lives right around there. So this is addressed in various chapters of the municipal code. So based on the discussion, we'll make sure that all of these changes reference each other and they're all aligned. But the way our town facilities and our facility rentals work as special events, it's regulations associated with that are within the noise ordinance, as well as public property, and specifically the Oyster Factory Park is stated there, as well as the special events ordinance. So a couple of things, like I said, when we really started to kind of digest what those comments were, where some complaints were that we had heard, and what I would say is that when there are complaints about noise or special events, people really need to contact the police department when it's happening. When we receive those complaints after the fact, we don't know how to correct it. And when I worked with the police chief and going through and trying to find out where the calls were, how many calls, quite frankly, there were none from our town facilities or from special events. Now, that doesn't mean that there weren't violations or issues that happened, but we were not notified to be able to address it. So that is one thing just to take note. Going through it, like I said, the impact on those neighboring properties, it's maybe do we limit the number of attendees to special events and facility rentals at certain facilities. Like I said, Oyster Factory Park, it can only accommodate so many people. There's only so many parking spaces. There's only so much physical space before it outgrows it. So, is that something that town council would like to consider? And if so, what is that magic number? Just to give you an idea, on the application, they do have to indicate how many people. The Rotary Oyster Roast, as well as the sunset parties, that number's 800. Now, that doesn't mean 800 people all at the same time, like going to a movie. They don't all come at the same exact time and leave at the exact time, but that's kind of a rolling number that they put on their application. So just to give you a feel of what a number could be, if that's something you want to entertain. The other thing is a reduction in the hours for the event or amplified noise. You could do this, again, facility-wide, or just focus on Oyster Factory Park. And like I said, I keep talking about that one just because of the proximity and where we've heard a lot of those issues do arise. So, and what I would propose in this is in your packet, and I will say for the public that's either watching online or here, I know there was some chatter that there is a curfew that we were proposing. That is not the case. That's not what I would propose at all. In that chart that's in your application, that I will go through, it's just a reduction in the hours for that amplified noise and what that entails. So that's what that is. I just wanted to go ahead and acknowledge that. The other thing we have heard is, yes, bass. Bass is something that, from what I've researched, it's not something that picks up on one of those noise meters. So bass is in our noise ordinance as basically a nuisance. So it can be subjective. We can continue to look at ways to tighten that as far as how to regulate it. So it is difficult, and I do from experience, quite frankly, my sons that listen to that music at a certain level, sometimes I feel it, and I understand what that means, but it's not something that's picked up on the noise meter, but it is something that is in our ordinance that we can strengthen that, but it is something that is considered a violation of our noise ordinance. And then the other thing is to just add some additional penalties for violations. Within the municipal code, we're limited as far as what we can issue for fines and tickets. However, special events and whether or not you are violating your facility rental agreement or your special event, that could possibly, disallow you to be approved for future events, or maybe you're not allowed to rent at the Oyster Factory Park for that particular event anymore. So just tighten that and make that clear expectation with what the penalties would be. Like I said, in the noise ordinance, there are some cross references, so we would make sure that that is all aligned. And then, like I said, that table A. So here is table A. There are some things, if you read our noise ordinance, that are not quite clear as far as whether or not special events must comply with this table. So I guess the first question is, regardless how that ordinance is written, is should special events, either at all the facilities or at the Oyster Factory Park in particular, be required to follow this table and how we measure the noise and that maximum decibel level, and also the reduction in that time. What I was proposing is Sunday through Thursday, so the general school days, work days, what those typical days are. That doesn't mean you necessarily would have to leave the event, but that's when it's time to, unplug the microphone or the speaker. That's just where I started, again, based on previous discussion. There's also been some discussion. What we could do is make it a seasonal thing. During the summer hours, when it's lighter longer, maybe adjust that versus other times of the year when it does get dark earlier and the expectation is it's, time to, close your shades and go to sleep. That's another suggestion that we could address. What I would also recommend is should you choose to require and enforce that special events and facility rentals have to meet this portion of the noise ordinance, what we could do is we could measure some events at these distances to confirm is 50 decibel levels, is that a reasonable number? You can do your research online and it'll tell you what 50 decibels normally is, but is that is that appropriate if we're going to apply this to special events? Would special events that the town deems acceptable and enjoyable and great for the community and the neighbors, if that's appropriate, is it a realistic number that they can comply with? Here's just a rendering that shows what that distance was. Again, I proposed lessening that because of that proximity to the neighboring residents. If you're at Buckwalter Place or eventually the New Riverside Barn Park, you measure where they're required to measure it from is from the sound source. So in this instance, I just assumed it's the pavilion and just drew out what 125 feet is, which would just be half, just to start with a number, versus what's in the code right now at 250 feet. So right now, what would happen typically, and please correct me, Chief, if I'm wrong, but the way the ordinance, if there's a noise complaint, the police officers go out there, voluntary compliance and education is always step one, turn a line should you further regulate special events at certain locations. Excuse me, you truly are not making me cry. I'm just having some eye issues lately. And again, this is just where we would also cross-reference it. Just some things to throw out for discussion was that 800 people for maximum attendance at Oyster Factory Park. Another thing is possibly, just again for discussion, is the number of events. So is there a number that's acceptable? Is it 7 days a week, every day? Is it 5 days? Is it 3 days? Or do we just remain silent on that? That's just something else to consider. And again, just strengthening that violation section to make it clear that a special event permit or a facility rental is not a guaranteed. You have to meet the rules and regulations, and if you don't, you may not be allowed to do it again. Any changes that are reflected with the proposed ordinance, should they come, we would make sure that the special event application also reflects those changes. So acknowledgement of amplified music, attendance, and anything that town council does approve. Next steps, if you do propose that, or if you do direct staff to move forward with changes, I'm anticipating bringing that for first reading in March and then second reading in April. However, depending on the depth of those proposed amendments, we could be back next month with first reading. And I did receive, do want to acknowledge, I received 4, and I believe council was copied as well, 4 public comments that were appreciative of the changes. They agreed with the changes and thought that was a good step to move forward. And if you have any questions or want me to go back and talk about each one, I'm happy to do so. Or like I said, Lindy is here as well to talk about special events.
We'll mix it up. Mr. Hamilton.
Yes. The last time we were here, Chief, I asked you how many complaints you got, and then she just confirmed it, saying that she followed with you as well, and the complaint was pretty minimal, right? So, and not only didn't we get a complaint, we didn't get a chance to address the problem, even if somebody may have experienced some loud noise, because we have policies and procedure in place to address it anytime there is someone violate our rules, right?
Yes, sir.
So I'm still kind of confused that in my recollection, there was only one incident that had extremely loud noise, and I witnessed that because I went there. But it's also a thing that why are we gonna punish everybody for one person's mistake? Changing what we already have in place, and I believe what we have in place gives us the ability to either find them, or have them to turn the music down, or do not issue another permit for them to use our facility in the future. We have, I have a lot of respect for staff and council for building beautiful parks. One of the things that make us stand out from other communities is the fact that we provide a safe place and a inviting environment for our citizens to come to. So I'm in favor of trying to manage that better if we need to manage it better versus taking one incident and making it a mountain. That's where I am.
Sir, if I could just add, I know Heather said we didn't receive any noise complaints, but we have received 9 noise complaints, but none from our parks. They were all from residents from around town, which typically we warn them, and they turn down the music. December 4th was the last time we received any noise complaint from a park, and that was Oscar Frazier Park. And then prior to that, November 8th was the last time that dispatch received a call for Oyster Factory Park. So when I say it was reported, people have to call dispatch. What's happening is either they're calling mayor or somebody else. It's not being recorded on dispatch. So I'm just going off the data that's provided to us. That's not to say there weren't more complaints, just the ones that were called at dispatch.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, if somebody calls me, I call him.
But if they call the non-emergency number, that's not going to come through yours?
Yes, it will. So they can call 843-524-2777. That's a non-emergency line. Dispatch will still put it into the system, and they will send out an officer, yes.
And that's the preferred method for a noise complaint.
Mr. Wood? I'm
Sorry.
Age before beauty.
Okay. I've got a lot of that. So, a couple of things. I think the recommendations thus far, I concur with. Less activity, control the duration. Gosh, it was 3 or 4 you had on there, the number of attendees, the hours, all of that. I understand that. And so what I was trying to think about was, the parks will continue to be under demand, that one predominantly because of the scenic, area that it sits in. It's just gorgeous setting there. So it gets the most wear and tear. But when you look at the parks that we have within the residential community, it's over at the Hayward House, Bluffton Park, Eagles Ball Field, and Old Town Dispensary, which used to be a nightmare for us years ago. We used to get phone calls, too many to even count. I think most of us up here remember that. And they still are grandfathered in. Not that it's a problem today, but these are all potential sites next to residential neighborhoods. So I think that I don't want to kill the golden goose to what I've heard up here. I think we've done a great job with our parks, and the fact that we do events in the community is appreciated, but we're trying to get the fine balance here between our citizens and the music. I think a lot of the music, because I believe everybody sitting at this table still gets phone calls occasionally where people don't call the police. They report it to us, and some of that I think has had to do over the years with they've just kind of thrown up their hands to some degree and just went, it's just the way it is, and I got to get used to it. I've heard those comments, but the only thing that I would still like to see is we haven't done our science, and the science means we need to go out there and take those measurements at actual events, hire somebody to go out and take some decibel readings at the 125 and the 250 or whatever we decide to do, or maybe 125, 175, and 250, and see how that impacts what we're trying to control, because if you just shorten the distance from 250 to 125, you may actually be taking the music level down so low that it's not functional, if you see what I'm saying. So I think we need to do our science. All the rest of it we can, if the council so deems, we can go ahead and do. But that one piece of the component, I would like to know what the science says on that.
Ms. Burden.
I agree with what Councilman Wood was saying. I think that the amount of phone calls and texts received, and I just think people have thrown up their hands and don't call dispatch. Unfortunately, as much as I say you have to call so we can get these numbers reported. I think there's a couple points I'd like to make. First, I think it's important to remember that this was a residential neighborhood before all these events started taking place. And a lot of the residents that live around there have lived there prior to all of this. I also think it's important to note that I bet 90 to 95% of the events, these changes are not going to affect them at all. I think most people do comply and are very reasonable with their music. I think thankfully we do have a couple other venues in town, one the amphitheater, and then when the new Riverside Barn opens, that gives space for events in which they are not in residential neighborhoods. And I don't personally think that unless we start receiving complaints in those areas that we need to change anything regarding those parks. I think we need to look at specifically what I view as the problem one, which is the Oyster Factory. I am in favor of ending the amplification at 9 o'clock. I personally would like to see that 7 nights a week, including Friday and Saturday, and not just the other ones. I think people can stay there. There's no curfew, as you stated, but I think to end the amplification at 9 o'clock is not unreasonable. I would like to do, as you suggested, go out there with a decimal reading at an event and look at that 250 and 125 foot mark and save, get back to that and deciding between the two. I would like to see us enforce our noise ordinance on these special events, which is currently not happening. I think that would help a lot. And I would like to see us have a time limit, a duration. I think 4 hours is completely reasonable to have an amplification. Again, the event does not have to be contained to 4 hours, but the amplification being contained to 4 hours. I feel very strongly about this. Again, I think it's because of the number of phone calls and texts that I have received over the last year. And I think it is very, very important for us to figure something out to improve, so this is not continuing to affect the quality of life for all of these residents that live around this park.
Before we go to Ms. Bridget, I'm going to go ahead right now and recuse myself on the rest of this topic. If you'll do that. Dan, you're the I'm not going to say anything, I'm just going to listen.
So going back to echo what Councilman Hamilton said, I feel that in hearing what the report and data is, and even the gentleman who came here and spoke, I appreciate his comments. I hate that he stepped out. It seems that the biggest issue is not in the time that these events are ending, but in the enforcement of the sound, the level, and the impact of the bass. And so it seems like there's a lot going on here in terms of, we have residents that aren't following the additional protocols. It's good always to contact your representatives because, we're entrusted to be able to take those concerns and address them. But we also have a protocol in terms of if it is an issue to the point of it's causing, discontent or what have you, there is a protocol for them to contact the police. And so we're not hearing from the police about it, and we're hearing from just a handful of residents. My concern is that we're now creating restrictions that are going to punish our almost 40,000 other citizens for what we're hearing as a complaint from a few people. And that's not how we should be governing policy, in the sense of we need to have inclusive conversations where everyone's here. And to just go off of, some of the folks, I think this was back in November, after that one particular event that we heard the conversations and saying that, well, we've lived here all our life and other things, it becomes really a discredit to others, who've also been here their entire lives, who can recall where they had a juke joint in the middle of Calhoun Street, and so it's been a place that's known for its eccentricity and liveliness. And so my concern, again, is that as we change the culture to accommodate some, we exclude really the other issues here at play. And it seems before we take such a huge leap in creating or responding to a problem that isn't as extensive as being made to be, my greater concern is what's going on with the enforcement. Because if we know we already have set in place, staff's made these rules, we've approved it, decibel level can't exceed 50, how are we to know who's exceeding and who's not if there's not actually someone out doing that? And I do recall there was a time when knowing that ATAC now is allowed to be able to take on the cost of paying for an officer to be on site because it's considered a facility that draws tourism. Why can't we instead look at whether it's for a month or a few weeks at some of these events, place an officer at the Oyster Factory Park for that particular event to be able to monitor or really gauge what's going on? Because again, I'm not the type that I want to make decisions just off of the opinions of a small vocal minority without being inclusive of everyone, because these events are not just parties of revelry where people are coming and are getting involved in drunkenness. These are reunion events, these are class events, these are some of our nonprofits and other entities who are hosting events that bring revenue into the town, but also create that communal sense of people being able to gather. So I think there are other steps to go to. I feel this is very preemptive in a response of few who've contacted certain council members here to voice their concerns, which are valid. I'm not saying that we dismiss that and say, deal with it, you live there. I'm saying let's not impede our own process that it seems has not been followed yet to really assess it, to say that this is an issue that causes us now to scrub our entire practice for that area.
Well, I don't think this applies to by far the majority of events that are held there. And I think when you talk about nonprofits and reunions and class, to say that the amplification should not last longer than 4 hours is not being unreasonable at all. I think we can come up with a reasonable solution for our residents and for the residential people that live around here. And I think what we currently have does not do that.
How so? You say 4 hours and the events aren't that. This is not an event going from, and the events that we've had don't start from 12 in the afternoon and end at 10 at night. If a person starts an event at 6 o'clock and their event now has to end at 9 because we're responding to one event where the music was reported to have been out of control, that we don't have the data to support that. I'm saying before we make decisions, let's have additional support to be able to do that and not be reactionary in our approach into what we're doing here. Because there are other residents impacted off of the Oyster Factory Park also, and not just the few that have voiced concerns.
I strongly disagree. I think we're being proactive, and as our events continue to pick up, I think we're getting in front of the problem before it gets out of hand.
How long has the Oyster Factory Park been a place for event venues, in the sense of if this is now just becoming a problem? In the past 10 years or what have you, we've had all types of parties. In this one particular event, we had immediate outrage for the particular type of event it was. And I'm saying that type of sentiment in terms of we're now going to respond to events of a certain type or variety, I don't think sends a good message that we're actually looking at a situation in a unilateral sense of like, this is how we're doing everyone. We shouldn't be responding to just one particular group. Everyone should be following under whatever that protocol is. If we have it established, people should be abiding by that, including our law enforcement.
I was a part of the study we did 10, 12 years ago.
2014.
And we scrubbed this and we scrubbed this and scrubbed this until we thought we had certified the issue to where everyone was happy with the final outcome. We workshopped it. We even went in one of the places mentioned tonight and set out and listened to the music ourselves. Had basically a council meeting there. We worked and we worked it, and this was probably the hottest item that we had to deal with during that time. So right now, I'm still confused because we still only have one event, and that happens. We have one event that I think abused our noise ordinance, and we didn't have we didn't follow the right protocol to address it. So now it shouldn't be that we need to workshop it again because we already workshopped this. You know, I'm serious. Not only did I sit and listen, I walked the streets and listened from the 250 meters or yards, whatever that was. We did this because we were being responsible, and to your point, we were being proactive for the future, but we was probably reactive because the problem usually at that time was only from that one facility. So let's not think that we're not sensitive to our citizens, because I wouldn't be saying this if I didn't go through the exercise. I went through it, and I'm proud of where we landed. That's my point.
But am I correct that in which they did put so much work in to that noise ordinance, but that is not, that's not being applied to anything that receives a special event permit. It's not applicable.
Yes and no. There are parts, I actually have it here. I pulled all of that as part of the research. So yes, everything that Councilman Hamilton stated is in here. There are field trips and workshops, and it does address the times of the amplified music. Now, what it doesn't do is drill down to different rules and regulations for different town facilities and parks, and it doesn't go as far as like anything related with special events and facility rents with terms of number of people and things like that. But it does talk about the hours for the amplified music.
But does the noise ordinance, does that decimal reading at 250 feet apply to events that receive special event permits?
Well, and I'll let Richardson's chiming in there. That's the gray area I was saying.
We discussed this a little bit actually today and in prior meetings, but there's a little bit of language in the noise ordinance that you could argue conflicts. There's a section in there that says if you have a special event permit, you're required to comply with the decibel reading standards of the noise ordinance, but you're exempt from a lot of other sections of it. And then there's another section that says if you want to be exempt from the decibel reading portion of I'm paraphrasing, but if you want to be exempt or you're going to have an event that's going to exceed the decibel reading limitations, then you need to get a special event permit. So there's arguably some confusion there. We still think it's enforceable, that they are required to, but one of the questions that Ms. Cullen asked was, do we anticipate, and was it y'all's intent to make sure that special events are required to comply with the decibel readings, like the 250 or whatever it may be? So I think that's one area that we've gotten clear direction from this council on tonight, is that part needs to be clarified and made explicit, and so that we will know and that the department will know how to enforce this in the future, because I think that was one of the issues that has been raised.
Yeah, and
Councilwoman Frazier, you mentioned about enforcement. That's one of the biggest things that we've been having to deal with is we're not sure if we can enforce when they have special event permits because of the wording. When that was brought up probably about a year and a half ago, first by our officers, I looked into it and it's really kind of confusing when you read it. And so we're not sure if they have a special events permit, if they have to abide by the said limits that are established. If that's clarified, then we can enforce it, no problem.
And was that something that was communicated, like if someone calls you out and says, hey, it's too loud, and if you all were to come out? Because I thought I recalled hearing someone before in a previous meeting that you did test it at a certain level. So if there's nothing in place, has that been communicated to say that we don't know what a decibel reading for a special event is, so we don't know what to enforce?
So essentially what we'll do is anytime we'll go out there, we'll take a decibel reading at 250 feet. Whether they have the permit or not, we will ask them to turn it down. And we try to do that across the board. If we do go back there again, then that's when we take proper enforcement action, either through a ticket or what have you.
And have you ever had any resistance in someone who didn't comply with your request to turn it down?
I think on one occasion.
But it wasn't at a special event, it was at a residential home, correct?
Yeah. What we see a lot of is at 250 feet, they may comply with a decibel, but it is the base. And when you have these houses pretty close by, they still may be within compliance, but a lot of times that base really does go through some of those windows in the house. It makes it a lot louder than it seems to be. So when we do get called, we may get called multiple times. We'll go out there and we're like, look, it's within the limits. But that base is really coming through. So I don't know if there's a way to measure base or not, but I think that's one of the biggest issues that some of these residents are dealing with is the base of a lot of music.
Let me make some observations real quick, because we could go on, since we're not all in agreement on this, we could be here all night. But to some of your points, first of all, I think the number of events over the years have grown at the Oyster Factory Park. So the people that were living there have watched an avalanche of events taking place that wasn't always that way 10 or 15 years ago, and we continue to grow. I distinctly recall all the details of what Mr. Hamilton was talking about, because we had maps. We actually showed on the maps where all the complaints were coming from. This is referring back to the dispensary over on an Old Town at that point. That was a lightning rod to this whole debate. And I can tell you for a fact that after we passed the ordinance at 250 feet, complaints continued to thrive. And I know this man got many a call and would call down here and say, you're too loud, you're blowing me out down here, cut it down. I would call. After that ordinance was passed, because it was too close to the proximity with the volume of the residential community. So I still think, and I think we've got to revisit the decibel level and to see how that impacts the bass and the drums, because the drums are a part of that too. I guess to end this, if we're ready to end it, is some of the things that has been put forth tonight. For me, it may be major to each of you. I saw some of those as minor. I don't know why we would allow people to play 8 to 10 hours at the park all day anywhere. I don't know why we can't make some minor adjustments, or the number of people down there. You can only put so many sardines in a can. And as I indicated a while ago, it made me think about the other locations like the Hayward House and Bluffton Park and the things that I've already mentioned, or if the Old Town Dispensary, they're still grandfathered. They could come back and put band back down there, and we go right back to where we were again. I know that's the noise ordinance, not a special permit per se.
Right, and by grandfathered, so there were a lot of there were other changes that came out of that repeal of that noise ordinance, and then the readopting, and the referral to the grandfathering, again, to everybody who's listening or is still here, is the location, because in addition to the noise ordinance and everything else that was done then, in the Unified Development Ordinance, there's a provision that you could only have live music or serve alcohol or consume alcohol within a certain distance of residential, public park, and maybe church. I don't have that in front of me. And that's where, yes, the dispensary, now Agave, their banned location, their where they have that stage is grandfathered in. So right now, that does not comply with the distance requirements for UDO. So they wouldn't even be allowed, if that was starting fresh, they wouldn't even be allowed to have a band at that particular spot.
And what I do remember was when the police would be called, they would go there and they would get to the approximately 250 feet and look at their decibel meter and go, their 50 decibels are okay. And then they would leave. And that was repetitive. So I think we have to address the decibel levels. I think you've heard that. Is that a fair assessment from most of us up here? To adjust decibel levels?
Well, would you like us to, what we can do is we can review the decibel levels, but I'm hearing two things. One, just focus on Oyster Factory Park, or are we focusing?
No, I was using those as examples of how it impacts the people in that surrounding area.
Okay, just want to make sure we're clear on where we're.
I'm focused on what you're talking about. Is there anything that was provided from staff tonight? And pull your, there it is, okay. Any of these recommendations provided from staff tonight that there's a group of people up here that feel are warranted to consider tonight?
Councilman Wood, if I could add in one thing before y'all get to the discussion on that. I think what we've also heard from y'all tonight are there are two things that we as staff want to undertake. One is what Richardson mentioned earlier, is to clarify that one thing in the language to make sure we can enforce as we need to. The other is to get with Lindy and Joe, or the police chief, to go out to some of the upcoming events and do some reading levels and see how things are going, and do some kind of some reconnaissance and come back with if we even need to address if they're meeting everything that's currently outlined. But we can bring that research back after the next events are kind of slow right now because of the weather, but we can look over the next couple of months as we get back into the season in March, April, see how the events are looking, see what the decibel levels are looking at, monitor the base. There might be a different type, there's DBA, there's DBC, there's different decibel levels we can try to check and see if there's something we may need to address with the base levels that address, because those seem to be the two biggest discussions that took place. And I think we can go do that, and we may come back, and what we may say is they were 50 on the DBA, but yes, we could hear the base. Here's a recommendation on how we can address that. And that may address a lot of the biggest issues that we're hearing. So I think those are the two biggest takeaways we heard from tonight, kind of 2, 3. If there's anything additional that council would like us to do in the interim, be more than glad to hear that as y'all kind of wrap up the discussion here.
Is it any way before another event comes up, as you said, there's a slow time, to, if you just test the decibel sound levels before, to do a test of what that base is in terms of getting an idea of what level becomes a nuisance in terms of, it doesn't make sense to keep just changing the decibel of the sound if the base seems to be what, from the gentleman who came here, is the biggest issue.
We can take a look and see. We'll probably have to reach out to somebody who can provide us a sound system to help get us some bass so we can test that out, and we'll let y'all know before that happens. But again, we can try some different meters, try some different readings, and try to come back with some research on that to y'all.
Okay, you keep looking at me. Richardson, did you have anything? Were you listening?
No, sir, I was just trying to pay attention.
So we haven't hit a consensus from what I can tell. So I think what I'm hearing from the town manager is wait for you to come back. Is that what I'm hearing tonight from council?
Let me tell you this. There is a measurement for base, and it's called SPL meter. SPL.
I want to make a comment too. I'm not talking about any particular park or anything, but as far as the ordinance goes, it's very important, Stephen, that, and Richardson, we need to know what we've got here. To have an ordinance that we don't know if we can enforce it or if we can't, is just as useless as, what some of those old people will say. We got to get it. And if we're gonna, I think even with a special event, we have to have something that we can enforce. I know there have been incidences where I've mentioned complaints, and, because they had a special event, there was nothing we could do. So that has been an issue before, and our ordinance needs to be cleaned up so that we can have something with teeth, and law enforcement can understand it as well. That's all I got. Anything else from anybody?
So decent.
I mean, just before y'all continue, because I really was listening, because this is something I'm really into. My name is Arthur Gadsden. I am a resident of Buck Island Road. And just to speak to where y'all can come in for more answers and more input, I've seen a 75th birthday get shut down at 9 o'clock. And it's still bright light out. Beaufort County and Bluffton Police both showed up to shut it down. I've seen those incidents. I've seen incidents where, it's a crowd of people. I'm a family that's big. Big. So trying to do the number of attendees, I hear you. But my family itself can reach 200 by itself. And because I'm kin to everybody from here to Charleston. Just to speak on that, just to help you get an idea of what we're talking about here. And not only that, we're talking about enforcement also. You're talking about issues that come after trying to enforce an early birthday party. And you got people who are organized and get part of those parties done to help entertain the town or even make some money because they're hosting an event. Now you're talking about affecting that. So there's a lot of push and pull with all this that we're talking about.
I think our main topic, we got to stay on the agenda items, is about public-owned property, more so than.
I've seen it from the residential side, and it affected us bad. So we're talking about, we're trying to do apples and oranges, apples and apples.
All right, any other comments?
I really hope that the rest of council will consider a restricted hours as far as not allowing this amplification to go on longer than 4 hours. When it gets to 5, 6, 7, 8 hours and all day your Saturday, you are hearing noise on a very regular basis. I think it's extremely unreasonable, and I think limiting the amount of hours is not unreasonable.
I hear you, and I believe that
We need to have all of the comments on that, just going off of what we think. We have our special events coordinator there, and I have yet to be at an event at the Oysters Factory Park that's been a 10-hour event every week for the 52 weeks that we have with amplified music each time.
All right, well, I think you've got enough to work with.
Okay, sounds like I am doing some measurements and I will be back.
This meeting is adjourned.
See your hammer down.